Hey everyone, so today's pattern is the Belle Rococo French Princess dress by FooFoo Threads. I did the bodice according to the pattern and the instructions. I did modify the skirt and did a simple circle skirt, and I also used gauze fabric, which I found at Hobby Lobby. I don't recommend it, but it turned out super cute. The first step is the sleeves. Basically, the sleeves are two long rectangles. You're going to do the same to all of the ends. Quarter inch marking on the right side of my fabric. I go ahead and I flip it over, and I use those markings to fold over and press down with my iron. This essentially is going to be the casing for my elastic. I go ahead and clip it, and now I am going to stitch across the top of this sleeve. I am not going to stitch this side. I am going to stitch that side, but not that side. So the reason why this is important is because this is your shoulder elastic side, and you're going to line up this pattern piece that the pattern comes with, and you're going to align it to the right side of the sleeve when it is right side out, and you're going to go ahead and you're going to cut it out. As you can tell, my sleeve, the right side is stitched closed, the left side is left open. Essentially, the right side is the shoulder, and you can see the direction of my Marie is facing the left hand side. So that on the next sleeve I do the same process. The side that is stitched, the side which is my shoulder, I go ahead, I line up my pattern piece, I go ahead and I cut it out, and the fabric is actually thin enough that once again you can see that the direction of my Marie is facing the left hand side, which is what I need. You can see the direction of Marie is facing to the left now, and on the opposite on the right hand side. So I know my directional fabric is in the right direction. So I clip the ends, and now I'm going to stitch that seam allowance right there closed. And I have done so here. I have done a straight stitch. I took my shearing scissors and I clipped the ends. And now I am ready to do my arm elastic and casing and finish that off. So I clip it just to keep it in place, and then I'm going to stitch all the way around, leaving a small opening for my elastic to be threaded through. So here I've done it. I've left a small opening. My encasings are ready, and I just put my elastic on this cool little tool that I have, and I always attach a clip to the end of my elastic so that when I pull it through, it doesn't pull through. So there's my opening. I go ahead and I pull it through. I'm making sure to always keep my elastic from twisting as I do it. I go ahead, and when I get to the end, I clip the ends to keep it in place. Threading the arm side is easier because it's just straight, and I always clip the ends. Now for the shoulder elastic, you can baste it in place until you attach it to the bodice, and that is important that you do it, and I didn't show it, but it is important. So the elastic that goes on the shoulder, you need to baste the ends. As for the arm elastic, you can go ahead, overlap it, zigzag it to attach the elastic, and then close your opening with a straight stitch. So the next part is assembling the bodice. Now the bodice essentially has 4 pieces, but the first 3 pieces are assembled together. So you have your front side and 2 back sides, which you're just going to clip together and then do a straight stitch to attach them. Really easy, main fabric and lining. It should look like this, and then I go ahead and I press my seam allowance open using my small iron, making sure that everything is perfect. And I'm ready now to add my sleeves to my bodice. The elastic casing will come in after the sleeves have been added. When I was adding the sleeves, I was concerned that the sleeves were coming too close to the center of the dress. So I had made a previous version of this dress, and I compared it and realized no, they are not too close to the center. So don't be concerned if they look like they're just too close. For this pattern, it was about 4 inches for the center for her size. So adding the sleeves is basically adding the seam allowances, lining them up, and then clipping the sleeve into place and working outwards until you get to the end of that elastic. So you just find your center and then work outwards on both sides, and you clip all the way along. And like I said, the main concern is that elastic. Same with the other sleeve. Click at the seam allowance and then work your way around. and clip all the way around. And like I said, it'll all get sandwiched in when we add our lining. So go ahead and stitch all the way around and your sleeves are officially added. Always double check to make sure that that elastic is properly secured so it doesn't come apart. Now you have to tuck in the sleeves between the main fabric and the lining. So you just put the lining right sides facing down and right sides facing up for the bodice, and you just clip all the way around. You can see lining up your seam allowances on the sides so that they are nice and aligned, and then just work your way slowly towards the end. The hardest part is the elastic part because it kind of wants to pull because of that elastic, so you really want to make sure that elastic is nicely stretched and neatly clipped in. So right there you can see the elastic sandwiched in between both fabrics. I also like to focus on making sure the center of the bodice is also aligned so it has a nice sweetheart neckline. You continue to do the same for the other side, working your way all the way down. And now that you have clipped and you have arranged everything looks perfectly aligned. Sometimes it does take a few times to just get that elastic just right. You go ahead and you can check, and then you can make sure everything is tucked in and you're ready to stitch all the way across. Now I always check, and it's really important because having that sleeve tucked in between, it's easy to make a mistake. Like here, do you see? I didn't catch my elastic, so I went ahead and I fixed that, and I continued to just double check one last time before I add the elastic backing, just to make sure that I was happy, nothing was clipped. Like I said, having that sleeve sandwiched in between makes it bulkier and harder, so you just want to take your time with that. I'm happy with the way it turned out. I used my shearing scissors to go ahead and trim the seam allowance, and my bodice is almost done. I'm ready to add the elastic back now to this bodice piece. The elastic back is the last step in finishing up the bodice. Basically, you have these two square pieces. You're going to put right sides facing together. I like to iron them together just to kind of line up the edges, make it nice and crisp. And you're going to go ahead, once you've done that, straight stitch all the way at the top to make one piece, and you're going to open it up and you're going to press the top as best as you can because you're going to do a stitch right along that top edge as close to the edge as you can. From that stitch you're going to mark down 3/8 of an inch because my elastic is 1/4 of an inch, then a 1 inch line, then another 3/8 of an inch, and then another 1 inch marking, and you can see the pattern of how it's supposed to look. I like to use this invisible ink pen, and then you're going to just do a straight stitch along all those lines. So this is what it should look like, and those 3/8 inch spaces are going to be your elastic casings. So you go ahead and you thread in your elastic through, and the pattern says the size of the elastic for your size. So once you've threaded the top, you're just going to continue all the way down, and you will be basting all of the elastics into place so that you can attach it to your bodice. So this is what the finished product should look like for your elastic back. You are now ready to attach it to your bodice. So you're going to place it right sides of the main fabric facing together, and then you're going to fold over the lining over so that you sandwich that elastic casing in between, as you can see. I go ahead and I clip it into place, making sure that everything lines up perfectly, and you can go ahead and just straight stitch that edge all the way down. Once you have checked that everything looks good, you can trim that seam allowance, or you can leave it the way as is, and then continue to the other side, right sides of the main fabric facing together, fold over that lining over to sandwich in that elastic casing. And once again, you just do a simple straight stitch all the way down, and your bodice is officially finished. This is what it should look like. This pattern does come with a circle skirt style skirt pattern, but I wanted a true circle skirt with mine, so I decided to do some calculations and some math. Please feel free to use the pattern pieces that it came with, but I'm going to try to simplify it as best I can. The first step is measuring around the entire waist of my bodice to find out what my minimum circumference is. So I measured all the way around and I came up with 29 inches. So I wanted to increase that 29-inch circumference by 50% to a 43.5 circumference so that I would have plenty of gathers all around my waist. Knowing that I needed a 43.5 circumference at the top, I was able to go online, type it into a circle calculator to find the radius, and I came up with a 7-inch radius for my skirt, and the length of my skirt would be 12 inches. So that is the final pattern that I used. So right here in the top of my half circle, that was the 7-inch radius, and from that top down to this bottom piece was 12 inches. Alright, assembling my skirt is a little bit easier. I go ahead and put the fabrics right side facing together and I clip them. I do a serge and a straight stitch on the sides, and then I go ahead and I serge the bottom. So here I've already done that, serge, straight stitch. I've serged the bottom of my skirt, and then I go ahead and I take my iron and I press down a 1/4 inch, and then I will just straight stitch all the way across there, always making sure to iron out any of those little gathers at the bottom. And this is my finished skirt. Now you have to gather the top. Because I used gauze, I was only able to use one gathering stitch, and that was a pain. And it was really hard. I don't recommend it with gauze fabric, but I did the best that I could. That's all I can say. If it was a cotton fabric, I think it would have been easier, but my skirt is officially gathered and finished and ready to attach to my bodice now. Okay, so attaching the bodice to the skirt is the easiest part. You keep your skirt wrong side facing out and your bodice right side facing out, and you stuff it in the center of the skirt like I showed you, and you line up your side seams first so that everything is perfectly divided with the gathers. And then I always forget to mark my midpoints between those two side seams, and that's important so that your gathers are a little bit more well distributed. And you're going to go ahead and pin all the way around. In this case, I realized I really do need to find the center point of my skirt, like the halfway of that circle skirt, so that I can line it up perfectly with that V shape of that bodice. So I go ahead and I press it down with my iron so I know exactly where my center point is, and I match up that V. Now I made a huge mistake when I did this because I clipped it, but then when I serged all the way around and stitched it, I didn't pay attention to that sharp V point, and I just kind of just did it the way I would do any other skirt, and it gave me sort of a loose center instead of a sharp V center, which is what the pattern calls for. So that's something that when you are stitching it, you really want to pay attention to, because if you want that defined center V of your bodice, you need to kind of stop, angle the needle, and not just stitch straight across like you would any other bodice. So that is in my note for you. Then I find the center in the back and I match it up with my bodice. I always use straight on my elastic casing. I don't use any gathered fabric, and that is because the elastic casing already has gathers, and if I add a gathered skirt, it just gives it like a really ugly puffy back, in my opinion. So I like to keep it straight on the elastic casing and just keep the gathers on the side. Straight stitch all the way around and you will be done. And like I said, just watch out when you do that center front to get a more defined V.